Good morning. Good morning. I want to thank the Fresno Chamber PAC for hosting this event. And it's important for the Central Valley to hear from the candidates and politicians who will have a major impact on our lives and our businesses. And they need to hear us and what the important issues are for us. It's crucial to our future. Progressive glasses. It is crucial to our future and success to be part of a statewide discussion. And it's my pleasure to introduce a fellow mayor and a man with a resume. Looks a lot like my own, except much more impressive. Antonio grew up in the southeast side of LA County, where he had a difficult childhood. His father left when he was 5 years old, and his mother was left to raise 4 children on her own. Antonio's mother instilled in all her children a respect for education and hard work. He completed his high school degree in night school in response to a letter from his mother pleading with him to stay and to make something of himself. And he certainly has. After graduating with a degree in history from UCLA, Antonio turned to politics, where he rose quickly through the ranks, from the LA County Metropolitan Transit Authority to the state legislature, to finally the Speaker of the Assembly in 1998. He was elected mayor of Los Angeles in 2004 and 2005, becoming the first person of Latin American descent to serve as mayor since 1872. And in his victory speech, he proclaimed, "I will never forget where I came from." I can relate to that. During his 2 terms as mayor, he dramatically decreased crime, slowed the city's fiscal health decline, and championed educational reform. Mayor Villaraigosa has impressed both his supporters and his critics by becoming a champion for what he calls the radical middle of American politics. He has also confounded labels of partisanship challenging the Los Angeles Teachers Union and being a frequent speaker at Republican events. He's an international traveler, an international star, has appeared on many TV shows. He's played himself on television. And I can tell you, I'm giving you competition. This ABC promotional for the Mayor youth comedy series, I did my 3-second cameo. So please join me in giving a warm Fresno welcome to Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa.
Thank you, Mayor, for that introduction. We got to meet a couple of months ago, and we had a really good meeting, about an hour long, talking about the challenges of cities, the importance of economic development, the need to really focus on the 5th largest city in the state. And I want to thank you for coming today, and obviously thank you very much for that introduction. And now that you're giving me competition on the TV series, I gotta step it up. So let me just say thank you. It's great to see so many of you early on a weekday morning as you get ready to go to work, and thank you for being here. I want to thank the servers for serving us. I grew up in a home where we served ourselves. Thank you very much. You know, we were talking a few minutes ago about a few people mentioning how often I've been here, and I want to take us back. I think it was April of 2015. At the invitation of the Westland farmers and meeting with a group of different groups of people, I came out here to Fresno. And I was on a listening tour. It just started the first day of the listening tour, and I decided to come to Fresno at the time. And I joked The meeting was supposed to be about an hour. It turned out to be 2.5 or 3 hours. And I joked at the end, I just want you to know I'll be back. And almost everybody at the same time looked at each other and rolled their eyes like, yeah, we won't see this guy again. And I said, and the good news is people will notice that I'm coming back, and they'll come back as well. Well, that listening tour lasted 18 months. It was about 51 days. 26 of them were in the Central Valley. Why did I come so often to the Central Valley? Well, the reason was I didn't know it in the way that I knew San Francisco or Los Angeles or San Diego, most of the places on the coast. I didn't really know those towns, this city. I said early on that the listening tour was an opportunity for me to figure out just what are the challenges facing California. So since then, I announced in November, I probably have been outside of the city of LA some 40 times. About, I don't know, I don't have an exact number, but something close to 1/3 of them have been in the Central Valley. Now, as time goes on, that will change a bit because I have to get everywhere. But for me, what I've learned is that, this is a great state. We know that. I've said wherever I go, we're the 6th largest economy in the world. We have, in 2014 and 15, we outpaced Florida and Texas combined in the number of jobs we created. But most of the wealth that has been created in that period was 30% of it was in tech, 74-5% of it is along a thin layer of the coast. I tell people the California rebound isn't rebounding equally across the board. We're the 6th largest economy in the world with the highest poverty rate in the United States of America. 3 out of the top 5 cities with the highest poverty rate in the nation are in the Central Valley. LA is 14th. San Bernardino is 9. So the next leader of this state is going to have to focus on what we do to create middle-class jobs, grow our economy, target those places that with the right kinds of investment, with the human capital, we can really grow together. And that is the gravamen, the central focus of my candidacy. So I've been here again and again, and early on I said, if I come, others will follow. And the joke is, a few folks are coming by and knocking on your door, and I tell people, well, if I was in office for 7 years, I think the measure would be how often I was here in those 7 years, not how often I come as I'm seeking another office. When I was a council member, I was everywhere. I was in every community. When I was mayor, I was ubiquitous. People saw me not just on a TV show, they saw me in their living rooms, in their neighborhoods. And that was a city of 4 million people. So the good news is people are coming. And you're right, Mayor, when you say what happens in this election matters. It matters to people here in Fresno. It matters to people in San Bernardino. It matters to folks in Los Angeles and San Francisco. It matters to the whole state. So the next governor is going to have to focus on growing our economy, on educating our kids. I got a record doing that. You mentioned schools. When I got elected mayor of Los Angeles, almost immediately, the business community and others came to me, educators, people focused on wanting to improve the schools, and they said, Mayor, we have a 44% graduation rate. 1 out of 3 schools in Los Angeles are failing. We will not thrive. We might not even survive with numbers like that. I took on the schools. I challenged a broken system. After 8 years as mayor, and I took on powerful interests, not because I was looking for a fight. I had worked for them for 7 years. My ex-wife was a union teacher, but I took them on because I was fighting for these kids. By the time I left, we went from 1 out of 3 failing schools to 1 out of 10. Nothing to brag home to mother about, because you don't want any failing school. We went from a 44% graduation rate to a 72% graduation rate. Today it's a 77% graduation rate. I took on the toughest schools in Los Angeles, in Watts, in Boyle Heights, where I grew up. I took on my alma mater, which when I graduated in 2001 had a 25% graduation rate. I'm sorry, when I graduated in 1971, I'm feeling young right now, feeling good. When I graduated in 1971, had a 25% graduation rate. When I became mayor in 2005, had a 36% graduation rate. Today, they have an 84% graduation rate. Today, a school that we chopped off and made a new school, because my high school was the largest west of the Mississippi, Roosevelt High School. I know you have a Roosevelt over here as well. Mendez has a 94% graduation rate. Our kids can learn. If we're going to address the fact that the new economy is predicated on intellectual capital, the next governor is going to have to work really hard with Fresno, LA, and every other area to ensure that we're graduating more of our kids from high school. Now in this state, about 80% of the state is graduating. 60% of this state is Latino or African American. They're graduating at less than 70%. But what we should all be concerned about is only 13% of them are going to a 4-year college. That is a prescription for failure. That is a prescription for an economy where some are making it and too many aren't. That is a prescription for a state that will not thrive going forward. Economic development. You know, I was mayor during the recession. I tell people, I was lucky when I was Speaker of the California State Assembly, we actually had some money and we made investments. But when I was mayor, the recession came and there wasn't much. So we doubled down. I tell people I didn't run on furloughs and pension reform. I didn't run on laying off people. I wanted to add people to the rolls. But when that recession came, I realized we were in trouble. Almost everybody, if you go back, and if there are any reporters here, go back to look at that time, the newspaper articles were saying LA was going to go bankrupt. And I said, not on my watch. And we were looking at thousands and thousands of layoffs. So I worked with our employees, our civilian employees, and I said, you're going to have to work with us to figure it out. Instead of laying off 5,000 employees, we laid off 1,000, but we got pension reform. We went from 6% to 11%. They were actually paying 3% less than fire and police. We instituted measures to stay strong during that time. We grew the economy in the middle of a recession. I made it free to open up a business in LA, and everybody said, why are you making it free? We need those taxes. I said, because they're not coming to LA anyway. They're not coming to LA. They go everywhere except LA. So I made it free, and we doubled the number of small businesses from 2010 to 2013. It used to be that you went to 12 departments to develop in LA. That's why nobody was building. I took it down to 1. You know why? Because at any given time, a half dozen of them were giving people contrary instructions, and we weren't building. So I said, guess what? Your job is to help create wealth, create jobs so we can add to the rolls, so we can protect our pensions, so that we could stand up for the people who serve us. During that time, the one group I didn't cut was cops. In fact, in the middle of that recession, when I was cutting everything else, I grew the police department. You know why? We had the most violent big city in the United States of America. Or one of them anyway. The gang capital, it's not Chicago, it was LA. The Bloods, the Crips, Mara Salvatrucha and 18th Street all started out, and you know all of them, they all started out in LA. We took gang crime down in the last few years by 55%. Violent crime by 49%. Homicides by 45% with constitutional and community policing. We did the most innovative anti-gang programs in the United States. The federal government used our template, took it to El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. But we didn't just do that. I said, you know what, in the middle of recession, I asked the people of LA, I said, the way to get out of this recession is to invest. So I need you to invest a half penny that will generate $30 billion, $40 billion over the next 30 years. We built 3 light rail lines, 1 busway, more than any city in the United States of America in that 8-year period of time. We put $4.5 billion in the airport. We hadn't put a quarter since 1984 Olympics. $1.5 billion at the port. We were the most overcrowded school district in the nation, and we built more schools in that time than any city in the world. We were focused on generating and spurring our economy. The next governor's got to do that. They got to do that with gusto. We got to build infrastructure again. But we didn't just tax our way. And I know there's a lot of people here not happy with that 12 cents gas tax. And I tell people, look, actually California hadn't raised its gas tax in a very, very long time. And we do need to make investments in infrastructure. But we need to put a lockbox on it. Because you can't say to the people, we're going to use this for highways and roads and bridges and other public transit and other infrastructure, and then start putting it in other places. But we got to think beyond that. How do you think we did so much in 8 years? It wasn't just that half-penny sales tax. We thought out of the box. I went to the federal government at a time when Democrats and Republicans weren't talking to one another, and I said, hey, you got high deficits and debt. You don't have any money for us. You haven't raised the gas tax in, I think about at that time in a decade. There's no money. So I said, you know what? I got a plan for you. We're going to put up our own money. But if we put up our own money, you ought to reward us. Give us low-cost loans and bonds so we could leverage that money. And to the Republicans, I said, you know what I'll give you? I said, I'll give you regulatory reform. Before you used to build, you'd have CEQA, and then you'd have NEPA. And CEQA was more rigorous than NEPA, but you still had to have both. You had one first and the other one second. So you extended the time, and all of you who do construction know when you extend time, it costs more money. So I said, let's eliminate NEPA. Couldn't get the Dems there, so we did it concurrently. We saved the time. We thought out of the box. Public-private partnerships. This is the only country in the world where the government builds all the infrastructure. Everywhere else in the world, great places to live, many of them. The private sector participates too. We can't do it all. We don't have that kind of money. We're getting regulatory reform. This is the state with the toughest environmental reform in the United States and environmental review in the United States, and we ought to have tough environmental review. But if I could get a compressed but rigorous review for a football stadium from the California legislature, why can't we do it for affordable housing? Why can't we do it for the 99 and the 599? You know, I mean, why can't we do some of this? I'll tell you why, everybody. Because you got people screaming. Because you got high logs on both sides. Because you got people that, you know, want their own way and haven't figured out what most of us have figured out in our households, particularly if you're married. You got to compromise. You got to work together. You know, you got to sometimes say, well, I'm going to leave that one alone. You know? You got to do that in politics. You hear all these people in California saying, we got to resist. And I understand that. A lot of what I see going on there is, you know, divisive and, you know, taking us back to an era that I don't think most of us are comfortable with. But you know what I tell people? The best way to resist? Let's graduate more of our kids. Let's create more middle-class jobs. Let's rebuild our bridges, our highways. Let's build public transportation. Let's move the prison pipeline to a pipeline of hope and opportunity. That's the best way to fight back. Not screaming all day long. You know, right after the election at the Democratic Executive Board meeting, I got up and I knew I wasn't going to get an applause for this. And I said, you know, look, I know everybody's upset. How many of you have children? Everybody raised their hand. Oh, yeah. How many of you have children? Okay. You know, when you scream at your children or you hit your children, most people don't do that anymore. Yell at your children when you're just nagging them. How do they respond? When you listen to them, when you talk with them, how do they respond? People don't change much from being a kid to being a grown-up. We got to talk with one another. We got to listen. Compromise isn't a bad word. I started out 25 years ago in a legislature that didn't have term limits yet. I was one of the term limit babies. And I remember them. They used to go out to dinner. You know, Costa and all of these people used to go out to dinner and they'd have relationships and they'd work on bills together and you know, they sometimes got in a fight, but you know, for the most part, there was comity, C-O-M-I-T-Y. There was compromise. There was civility. Those C words are important. You know, I don't know, when I'm on TV, I don't know if you've noticed, when you see me on national TV, I never go on with a screamer. And I always tell the producer, I tell my staff, tell the producer, he starts screaming, I'm going to shut down. I was mayor of LA. I'm going to be governor of this state. I'm not a screamer. I want to talk with somebody if they want to be rational. If they don't want to be rational, I'm not screaming. We're not doing that. Civility is important. Statesmanship is important. The ability to find some middle ground is important. I'll end with this. It's also important to show up. I've come to have, someone saw me on Instagram and they said, I saw you went to a few farms and almond processing plant and you know, I was at I think 5 places yesterday and they were mentioning, and I tell people, the more I come here, the more I respect what so many of you do here. The more I realize there are really good people of good stock here in this part of the state, and they deserve someone that respects them. When you respect someone, you don't just say you respect them, you show up. you know, and you don't just show up when you're knocking on the door and you want their support. You show up when you're governor or you're an elected leader and you come back. You convene them. You know, you them in a part of the state that only has one UC campus, which, by the way, Cruz Bustamante, Dennis Cardoza, I was majority leader back then. I had to help carry UC Merced on my shoulders. I was there from the beginning. In fact, when I went to visit UC Merced, they actually had a picture of me with the UC Merced hat, you know, a little chubbier back then. I was having a lot of rubber chicken dinners. I committed when I went the second time, you know, we're gonna put a UC Merced medical school here. And we're gonna find the money, probably through the private sector, to help these kids from the valley become doctors, help pay those loans back, and then say to them, if you come back to the valley, where access to medical care is the most critical, and you work in the valley for, I don't know, figure it out, 10-year period of time, 7-year period of time, we'll pay off your loans. And then after 7 or 10 years, you end up living there, right? But with the valley this big, there's nobody, you had one person on the UC Regents. I'm not sure if you have one now, and if you do, it's just one. Used to have two. Yeah, Fred Reese, yes, I know. And thank you. And on the Transportation Commission, you got transportation issues here. Transportation Commission, I don't think there's anybody. I mean, what happened to representation? You know, when I was mayor, I'll be honest, everybody came from the west side, or disproportionately. The west side had all of the appointees to everything. I changed that. I said, I want to see people from Watts. I want to see people from the east side. I want to see people from places that live here too, paying their taxes, maybe not as much because they're poorer, but they got a right to representation. I brought the valley in. The valley always felt like a stepchild. They were represented. This valley's got to get represented in the next government, whoever it is. And the good news about me coming is they're all coming. And they're all gonna, you know, be like the used car. None of us are used car salesmen. Used car. What do you do when you buy a used car? You drive it hard, kick the tires, you look under the hood. You all have had an opportunity to look under the hood. Right or wrong, agree with me or disagree with me, I'm a guy that shows up. And I'm gonna show up when it's all over.